Hello, I'm Meghann Scully and welcome to Re-Energize, a show that looks at sustainability in all its forms and what we can do to shape a clean energy future. On this episode, we're chatting about climate and storms. A very topical subject right now with Storm Éowyn, one of the most powerful storms ever to hit the island of Ireland. Close to 1 million homes were left without power, hundreds of thousands without water. I'm here with producer Connor.
Hi, Meghann.
And we had 3 amazing guests on this episode to help us understand our changing climate and the fallout this can bring. Dr. Noel Fitzpatrick, weather researcher and science communicator, has some great insights on Ireland's extreme weather future. Siobhan Wynne, regional manager at ESB Networks, tells us what happens behind the scenes when a storm hits. And Limerick residents Neil and Maura Robinson tell us their nasty surprise from Storm Éowyn.
So this was a great episode. I learned an awful lot.
Well, I have to say, when I get annual leave, I like to go and lie in a sun lounger in like a nice hot country and maybe, lie by a pool, go for a little dip. But not our Noel.
No, he likes to run towards the storms when everybody else is running the opposite direction. So there were some pretty amazing stories, weren't there?
Do you know, we were talking about this movie Twister before, and when you see the movie, you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. It's like they made a film about storms. But Noel actually recreates that quite a lot.
Yeah, by choice. Yeah. So we have Noel, who also told us lots of great stuff about storms more generally, and then we're kind of back in Ireland looking at the two sides of the storm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the team that work with the yellow vans, which I think we've all kind of become part of our almost DNA at this stage. It's nice to hear from Siobhan to know about the people on the ground who drive those vans, because those are the people actually that get out and actually fix our electricity and the poles and get us back up and running when we do lose the lights.
Yeah, and then so we had kind of the story of what goes on behind the scenes at ESB Networks, and then the story of what happens on the other side if you're in the middle of a storm. And, well, maybe we won't say too much about Neil and Maura's story, but it's pretty crazy.
It's worth listening to because it's actually pretty unbelievable what they went through. But it's like, all I'll say is I'm grateful that they were here to tell us the story.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm living in Dublin. So actually Storm Éowyn wasn't hugely disruptive on this side of the country, but you're on the West Coast in Galway.
And I have to say, I couldn't believe what I saw. Well, actually, I didn't get to see much initially because we had no electricity, we had no water, and we also had no Wi-Fi, so we couldn't even connect. We had to drive to a bigger town that was a couple of miles away to get some service to find out what exactly was happening. We got pretty badly destroyed in the west of Ireland between tree damage and electricity and water and all the basic supplies being gone for quite a number of days. But you know what? We made the most of it.
Well, maybe we should go and listen to Neil and Maura's story first then, will we?
This is probably one of the most incredible storms, obviously, in history ever experienced. I'm from the west of Ireland and I've seen the damage that has been done, but you two have really experienced the worst of the worst. Can you tell us what happened?
We went to bed that evening. I left the bed because Neil was snoring. I was at the front of the house. I heard I felt first an incredible judder. The whole house shook, and then there was an almighty bang. And I thought something had happened, so I ran to our bedroom to ask Neil, would we have a look? And instead of opening the door, I just found that the whole of the roof had collapsed into our bedroom. And so I was, obviously all the power was off. I had a mobile phone with a light on, and you could just see rubble, masonry, bits of roof, and Neil standing shivering in the corner. And I was very anxious. I thought it was amazing that he'd even survived, and suggested that he must be suffering from shock. But actually it turned out he was just really, really cold because the cold water tank had just tipped on top of him.
Oh, Neil, you're in the bed when this happens. I mean, what's going on in your head?
Well, I didn't really know anything about it at all. I sort of heard a noise, but then I was basically soaking wet because, as Maura said, the tree smashed into the side of the house, took the roof out above the bedroom, and obliterated the water tank. So I was just drenched in all this cold water, and the water kept coming because then the pipe that fed the water tank just thought that the water tank was empty, so it just carried on spewing water into the bedroom. So Maura was there with her phone light on. I'm scrabbling around trying to find my phone, my torch, which I had actually taken to bed with me that night, thinking we might have a power cut. So I then sort of pressed the door by the side of the bed, which led into the ensuite bathroom, and nothing happened because there was 48 tons of tree leaning against it, so I couldn't open it. So at that point, we ran around. I was trying to find something to wear.
I had to climb over the rubble to get out of the room.
Yeah, I had to climb over the rubble that was all over the bed to get out of the room to try and get to the stopcock to stop the water from pouring in. And at that stage, I mean, sort of, it was dark, so we hadn't really any clue as to how bad the damage was. We just knew that something had hit the house. It wasn't until a few hours later, when sort of it was getting light, that we were able to go out and see that
the back of our house was missing.
Yeah, the large part of the back of the house was missing. Yeah.
I mean, obviously incredible that you survived it and that nobody was injured or sadly, lost their lives in your house, because you were in the bedroom and the fact that it came through the house. So what goes through your mind? You mentioned there you were scrambling, trying to find torches, trying to find clothes, trying to turn off the water. What exactly then happened for the next few hours? Because you mentioned it was the middle of the night. So what goes through your mind? Is it does adrenaline kick in?
Yeah, definitely adrenaline. Everybody was saying, we'll be shocked, but we didn't really have time to be shocked. We just had to respond.
Yeah.
I know what was going through Neil's mind was that he was looking for clothes. And I remember looking at all of the rubble and thinking, now is not the time to start packing. We need to do something. But I hadn't realised, of course, that he'd had the water tank poured on him and he was absolutely freezing. And there was a storm blowing through the room at that time. So he tried to get out of the bedroom, got some clothes and tried to close off the water. And I ran around the downstairs because the roof was now leaking through into the kitchen. And I was in about 2 inches of water, futilely sort of putting buckets around the room in the dark, but not really making any impact. And also trying to block up. The tree had also crashed through our dining room doors. So the wind was just blowing through the house. So I was just trying to find some of the bits of plaster that had fallen down from the roof and put them against the door to keep the wind and the rain out.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. And then she went back to bed.
You went back? Did you actually go back to bed?
I did.
Yeah.
I did everything.
Did
I did
you?
everything I could. I realised it was dark. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. There was nothing more I could do. And I figured that we were probably in for quite a busy day the next day. So I went back to bed, yeah.
Wow.
Not to our own bed, obviously.
It just sounds like something genuinely from a movie here that I'm listening to. It's like you'd think I'm listening to the trailer of some blockbuster movie that's coming out. What happens then afterwards? As you mentioned, it was going to be busy the next morning I've seen the photos because they were all over social media. So what happens then? Your house, your home, it's effectively the ceiling, the roof is gone. Yeah,
we had a wonderful mehel of neighbours. So all of our neighbours joined together. We're in a relatively small cul-de-sac of 11 houses. The WhatsApp went out, everybody arrived, and then there was a stream of neighbours sort of carrying things out. So the first thing was to carry out everything that was potentially about to be damaged when the roof fell in, and then to get as much of the furniture out of the way of the impending collapse. So everybody just joined together, started pushing our furniture out of danger's way, taking books out of the offices, and looking after us. And we were absolutely blessed by the series of events. I've never seen so many people come together at the same time to do what needed to be done just at the right moment. It was fantastic. Oh, the sense of community.
Yeah, we were absolutely inundated with help. Friends who lived further away brought food. So yeah, we were well looked after and helped in those first few hours, which made a tremendous difference because it felt that we were kind of getting a grip on things, quite quickly. So that, sort of helped us deal with it.
And immense amounts of black humour.
Yeah, immense amounts of black humour. Maura almost did the double. She almost got a new house and a new husband and the insurance money. So that's
could have had, a Mr. Jackpot, life assurance and a new house.
Well, so speak to us now. What's the story with the house? This isn't the house you're currently sitting in, is it?
No. So we were really lucky that a local builder, Aidan Byrne, came and helped our tree surgeons, monster tree surgeons, and they put a tarpaulin over the top of the house to try to keep the worst of the weather out. So the house is is as protected as it can be while we wait for the insurance to decide what they're going to do or what they're going to enable us to do. And in the meantime, we have some wonderful neighbours who are away at the moment and have lent us their house. So we're in the house next door, looking at our house, hoping to fix it soon.
How are you feeling now? What is your thought process?
I'd say I think, sort of we're just kind of, waiting. I mean, I think we realise how lucky we were, how an immediate impact, sort of changes in weather and climate can have on us all, sort of in an instant. Months of your life are gone. A 200-year-old tree, which was structurally sound, is gone. And how much of a change that's made to the environment around us, sort of because obviously lots more trees went than ours. So
there's an avenue down our road of maybe 15 trees, which are all the same size as or almost the same size as the tree that fell onto us. And so now all of our neighbours and people round about are looking at beautiful old trees that are over 100 years old, and they're not seeing beautiful trees anymore, they're seeing a threat. And when you see the damage that they cause, they really are quite a threat. So that leads you to wonder then what's going to happen to all of our old trees.
You touched on it there, Neil, about the climate, and I guess, that's where there's going to have to be the discussion around, we can't have another storm like that. That one was just...
We will have another storm like that. Yeah. We're going to have more and more, and we really don't seem to be thinking of them in the bigger picture. So there was an awful lot of fuss about what happened to us, and lots of sort of interest in the media. But everybody was telling it like it was a human interest story, a funny story, woman saved by snoring. And it was, if you have that kind of black humour. But I don't think anybody actually looked at it as a climate disaster, one of many that's going to happen again and again that we really need to address.
Absolutely incredible to have Neil and Maura here with us to share that story. Now, moving on to Noel, the man who spends his holidays chasing storms. Dr. Noel Fitzpatrick, a weather researcher and a science communicator. Tell me, what is that?
I guess it's someone who loves weather and wants everyone else to know about it as well, right? So I've always been interested in science and in particular weather since I've been a kid, and explaining to people why that's so interesting to you is one reason why I got into science communication. And also with things like climate change and the impact of severe weather, being able to help people to understand why that happens is also really important.
So what then is your background? What did you study?
So I did science in Galway, but I was always interested in meteorology. So I went over to the University of Reading, where there's a really good meteorology department over there. So that was where I did a master's. And then a little while later, I moved over to Canada and I did a PhD over there. So I had always been interested in the climate side of things, and there was a chance there to work on how things like snow and ice are changing with climate change, things like that. So it was a really sort of interesting, exciting opportunity. There's a mixture of like the weather, sciencey theory kind of stuff, but also getting up into the mountains and doing cool science up there as well.
You know, we say Irish, we love the weather, but you really love the weather, so much so that it's your entire career now.
It is, yeah, it is. And it's funny when you talk to people who knew me as a kid and I tell them what I'm doing now, they're like, oh, that's so funny, you're doing exactly what you wanted to do when you were a kid. Yeah. But it's always a topic of conversation. People, when they hear that you work in weather and climate, there's always a story or there's always something that they want to know more about. So it's quite Ireland is a good place to be in this area, for sure.
So tell us now where you're working and what you're doing.
So I work for Meghann and I am our satellite meteorologist. So basically that is looking at ways of using data and images and pictures we get from satellites and looking at ways that we can use those to better understand our weather, to track severe weather and storms, to monitor our climate. And it's a very exciting area at the moment. Europe has just launched a whole bunch of new weather satellites. So there's lots of new products and data and information that we'll be able to use to improve forecasts and to understand our atmosphere better.
Now, I don't know, is it with age or is it because of social media that I basically have access to the likes of Met Éowyn and social media? But I know I've definitely become more obsessed with weather and all the storms we're getting. I feel like we're getting more storms than ever. Or is it just because we're more exposed to it because of our social media?
I think it's both. So there's a conscious effort to make the public more aware of storms. So things like naming storms, for example. That's it's amazing how effective it is. People really latch on to a name of a storm and they understand it's an event, so that it gets a lot more coverage. And that's useful because it means people listen to the warnings, people heed when to stay indoors and not to travel, things like that. And then there's also the increasing intensity of the storms that we're getting. So often we hear sort of future projections of, we're going to have much worse storms in the future and things like that. But now we're actually seeing it, sort of a yearly basis that these storms are occurring now. So they're much more visible than they were, certainly because they're getting more coverage, but they're also increasing in intensity as well.
As well there, you mentioned names. I have to come back to that because it always causes, again on social media, when the names are released, everyone gets pure excited. How does that come about and how do you decide I know it's done alphabetically, but how do they decide what it's going to be called?
Yeah, there's a collaboration. It's not just here in Ireland, so through Met Éireann, but there's also the British Met Office and the Dutch Weather Service, KNMI. So we collaborate because the storms that affect those countries, it's pretty much the same region, meteorologically speaking, so we're interested in the same storms that are coming across. So we collaborate and basically we all get to pick a sort of an even number of names each year to add into the list for that year. So you'll see it if you look down through the list for any given one year. There are some names in there that definitely don't sound familiar to us, and maybe exactly, for sure. And maybe they give, presenters a little bit of difficulty, making sure that you pronounce it right. But it's a collaboration. And it's also helpful because it means that, for example, if in Britain, if the UK Met Office was to name a storm first, we can use the same name and in the Netherlands also, so that because the storm obviously doesn't care about country boundaries or borders or anything like that. So you're keeping a consistent message as that storm moves from country to country.
Interesting, because as you said there, when the names come out, I did always notice there's always a few really Irish names,
yes,
and then there's a few kind of obscure names. You're going, where did that come from? But I didn't know that about the Dutch office as well.
Yes, yeah. I suppose you don't want to you don't want to make them too obscure either, of course. But there's a few that come in there that you kind of know. Okay, our colleagues in the UK Met Office or in the Netherlands are going to struggle with that one.
It is great though, as you mentioned, because there's certain storms over the past few years I just remember so well, and it's probably because of their name.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And even particularly with social media, you can put in a hashtag with the name and it's such an effective way for getting that message out there. And as I said, it's sort of a coherent package. It's a story that people can follow over a few days and they know you're talking about this particular event.
And we talked there, of course, about climate change, we have to discuss as well. As you mentioned, the storms are getting worse. They seem to be getting more frequent. Is this all because of climate change? Yeah,
so I mean, particularly where we live, it's quite a turbulent location anyway. So we're quite close to the jet stream. So it's this kind of boundary between hot and cold air. And we are going to experience storms, and we have experienced storms for a long time. It's just that's the nature of where we live. However, we have increased the amount of fuel for these storms. And so what I mean by that basically is as we heat our atmosphere, there's more energy there for these storms to intensify. So it means that when storms do occur, that they are becoming more intense, and that's likely to increase with time. Now, in terms of if these storms will become more frequent, there's less certainty on that we actually have more storms, but there is a fairly good level of confidence that when they do occur, we're going to see stronger storms. Because of that, there's more fuel for the fire, really.
I suppose, though, with more storms, maybe are we starting to get a little bit more, are we getting better prepared for them?
Yes, I think so. And it's important that we do, because if you think about things like when someone is maybe designing some infrastructure for a town or a city, or bridges or roads or flooding defences, things like that, they might use things like 1 in 10-year events, 1 in 50-year events to sort of plan for. But those events are becoming more frequent now. A 1 in 10-year event might be a 1 in 2-year event, say thinking of flooding, for example. So it means that designers and engineers and planners really need to consider what the environment and the weather and the climate is going to be like in, say, 50 years' time. So I think we are considering that on a practical way, and getting ready for that. And there's a lot more messaging out there in terms of getting the message across that climate change is happening. It's not just something that's going to happen in the future. So, but like all of these things, there's still an awful lot of work to be done as well.
One thing I've noticed as well in recent years, and again probably because of social media, is twisters happening in Ireland. Or I know they're probably mini twisters compared to what we see in America, but it's kind of unusual things happening around Ireland and around the waters as well.
Yeah, we do get them from time to time. So I think kind of as you say, they're perhaps not as dramatic or as frequent as what things we might see, say, for example, in the States, but they do occur. The general figure that's put out is maybe we get about 10 or so tornadoes per year. Often these will blow out in a field somewhere, and they might not even be noticed, But then there are other occasions when they do pass through areas. We had one, potentially a tornado in Leitrim Village last year that got quite a bit of coverage on social media. Some very dramatic videos from that. So if you have thunderstorms forming, that means you do have the potential for these kind of wind events like tornadoes to form. So they do occur, and we don't have the same sort of heat energy that they have in places like America, where you can get these really strong storms to form. But again, looking to the future, if we're increasing the amount of heat energy in the atmosphere and the amount of moisture, which is another source of fuel for these storms, it's possible we could see more going forward.
I think there's something there, it's scary fact. But I think when you see the videos on social media as well, it's like when you see it's in Ireland, it almost feels surreal.
It does, yeah, it's true, because we're so used to seeing it, as you say, on television or in movies and things like that. But we have dramatic weather even without these tornadoes and twisters as well. Like the storms that we get that come across the Atlantic that we all know, the winds in those can be very impressive, and obviously the waves and the coastal impacts of those storms are very strong. And as we mentioned, like looking to the future, an increase in intensity of those, that could be dramatic in terms of the damage that they could cause.
Absolutely. We mentioned America.
Yes.
Tell us about your hobby.
Yeah, so I'm sort of, I guess it's almost like a busman's holiday that I go on every now and again. So I mentioned, like, I'm quite interested in photography as well, and something that I quite enjoy is tracking down storms to take pictures of them. So, or storm chasing, as some people would say. So it's something that I've been interested in for a few years, and have taken a few trips over to the States. And so it's usually the sort of the central parts of the States that often you don't get tourists going to, really. Even the locals, when you're there, kind of asking, why exactly are you here? So it's sort of, like Oklahoma and Kansas and Nebraska, these central, the flyover states, as they call them. But springtime in that area of the States, you get a mixture of conditions that make it ideal for the formation of really severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. So I've taken a few trips over there. They're basically sort of glorified road trips, really. Yeah. So you go over, you have a plan for roughly the sort of the states that you want to be in, but you're kind of following the weather. Really sort of a few days beforehand, you might be working out what state you want to be in, and then as it gets closer and closer to the time, you're sort of narrowing down your field of interest. So you're looking at all the information that's coming in, all the weather models, and then as the storms start to kick off, you're looking at radar, you're looking at satellite, and then of course you're using your eyes as well. But a lot of it is driving. I mean, I was over there in May of last year for 2 weeks, and I picked up a rental car. And when you pick up your rental car, you have to write down your mileage at the start, and then when you drop it back, you have to write down your mileage as well. And in 2 weeks, I had done over 10,500 kilometres.
Oh my God.
So it's a huge amount of driving. But when you get to the point, a lot of these storms kick off in the evenings, usually just when all the heat is built up during the day. And all the pieces have come together. It's kind of it's a puzzle, really, that you're trying to solve. You're looking at all the information, trying to find yourself in the right spot. And when you're there, when these storms start to kick off, it's really spectacular.
And is there like a group you going around together, or is it kind of like
there can be? I have gone with. There are others. Some people that I know in the States, and then there are some others from Ireland who are very good sort of meteorologists and storm chasers as well. In May, I went on my own. This time, just sort of to see what it would be like, I guess, to sort of, because when you're on your own, you're making all the decisions yourself, but you are managing a lot of information as well, and also trying not to get lost on all these country roads. But when you're standing there, as I said, in some of these locations, and you just have these storms coming towards you, and they're not like anything you would see here in Ireland. They're almost like these massive sort of spaceships coming across the sky, and there's lightning, and if you're in the right location, you might get a tornado, and really spectacular stuff.
It sounds frightening, but also I could see where like maybe the adrenaline come from as well. Like I'm thinking here, when you go on holidays to mainland Europe and you're in Spain or somewhere, and suddenly like this tropical storm comes, and we're all sitting. I know you're not meant to go near your window during the thunder lightning, but we're all there like sitting in watching, thinking it's amazing, and then it passes within a couple of minutes, and suddenly then it's place is dry again, and you can go back out.
Yeah.
But I can't even comprehend what it must be like over there, because I grew up watching Twister, and loved Twister.
Yes.
We used to think it was like crazy. It's like they're driving into the tornado. But I guess when you love something and you want to see it up close.
For sure. And Twister is definitely an influence on me for sure as well. Yeah, I mean, you're managing your risks as well, for sure. So like some people have different levels of risk. I take it cautious. I mean, I'm there to take pictures. That's really what I love to do. So you are sort of, I very much decide beforehand. I'm like, okay, I have this sort of level of comfort. If I feel this is too close, I'm going to get out of there. Because it's not just tornadoes you're worried about. You can get massive hailstones from these storms. I've seen storms drop hailstones more than 10 centimetres in diameter. There's really strong winds, you know, as you mentioned, really, really heavy lightning and things like that. So you're constantly monitoring your surroundings to make sure, like for example, a storm I was on in May, it was spectacular and it was amazing. I was getting these great photographs, but there was another equally powerful storm that was forming behind me. And so the roads that I had to kind of get out of the way were increasingly reducing, you know, my options. So you really just have to like make a call and get out of there at the right time. But it's sort of an experience you can't really have anywhere else. You know, you can. That's why I'm willing to travel for it and sort of put in all those hours on the road.
It's a lot cooler than my hobbies anyways, I'll tell you that much. It's great to get so much insight from you. In terms of storms, what do the next few years look like? Like, what are we facing into?
Yeah, so in terms of, maybe say in terms of our weather, even to look at it, say, by the middle of this century, Ireland is warming pretty much on the global average. So if we were to compare it, say, with, say, the start of this century, so the year 2000, I think by the middle of this century, we'd see between a degree and 1.5 degrees of warming. And what's interesting is that our warming is kind of taking place more at the extremes. And so what I mean by that is basically our warmest summertime temperatures will be getting even warmer. So that's important for things like heat waves and health issues around that as well. And then also our wintertime temperatures, our coldest wintertime temperatures are also going to be getting warmer. So that might sound like a great thing, but there are reasons that we have cold weather during the winter, and important reasons. You know, we get frosts and we get ice days, and we're going to see a dramatic reduction of those, and they're important for our whole ecology. You know, there's a reason that we get those kind of things, and also for our agriculture. You know, frosts and ice days are very important for getting rid of pests, things like that, and our natural systems can't respond rapidly enough to keep up with these rapid changes. So that's one way. Our rainfall as well, we expect to see our rainfall in a more kind of extreme distribution. So what I mean by that basically is that we'll probably see more dry periods, particularly during the summer, but then in the winter we'll have more very wet days. So we kind of get more extreme rainfall and then more dry periods. So that's going to really highlight the need for a good water management, both in terms of how do we manage water when there isn't as much around during dry periods, and then also flood defences, things like that during the winter when we're getting more of these extreme rainfall events. And then in terms of our storms, as mentioned, whether we'll get more frequent storms, there isn't a strong consensus on that yet. But because we have more heat in our atmosphere and we'll have more moisture in our atmosphere, because a warmer atmosphere tends to have more moisture in it, that's fuel for storms. So we'll have more fuel for storms, which means we can anticipate that our storms will be stronger.
So from the science of storms, let's move on to Siobhan Wynne and find out what exactly happens behind the scenes at ESB Networks. Now, Siobhan Wynne, you're a regional manager with ESB Networks, so tell us what exactly your role involves.
Yes, so in ESB we've 6 different regions geographically, and my region is Central Region, so as it suggests, it's the one in the middle. So I've covered the geography from maybe Kilkenny in the south up to Roscommon in the north of the country, and everywhere in between except for Dublin.
That's a lot of area to cover, isn't it?
It is, yes. No, it's great, yeah. We've about 260 people on the team, so it's a really busy team, making sure everyone has a reliable supply of electricity all of the time.
I think everyone knows the ESB vans and the trucks, that yellow. I think we're all just so used to it now. It's one of those iconic brands.
It really is, yeah, it is. No, and even it's synonymous, I suppose, with hopefully making sure you have power or else restoring it to you. So.
Speaking about power and restoring power, we're obviously getting a lot more storms than usual, and we've named them now, we know all about them, we get the warnings for them. But how then can ESB, I guess, prepare for a storm? You know a bad one's coming and you're like, right, it's going to be inevitable that there's going to be power outages. Is there a way to prepare?
Yeah, so preparation is really important to us. The first thing I suppose for us is really we need to monitor the weather. So we have a really close relationship with Met Éowyn, and they provide our operations team every day with a really detailed weather forecast for the next 5 days. And so if there is going to be a weather event, they'll generally alert us in plenty of time. If they're going to be issuing an orange alert for wind or a red alert or an advisory. And that gives us time then to really analyse the information and determine what we need to do. So if we get one of those alerts, we normally will stand up our emergency response team, and they will then look at all of the Met Éowyn information, and they make a decision as to what we think the likely impact is going to be. So if it's going to impact on the whole country, or if it's going to be a particular region that's going to be impacted. And based on that, then we'll decide whether we need to mobilise crews to their own home areas or ask them to prepare to travel when the storm has actually hit. And then also, I suppose, the National Customer Contact Centre deal with really high volumes of calls, when we have a storm. So that's why it's really important to staff up. And just for example, say during Storm Dara, which hit in December last year, 2024, they handled over 80,000 phone calls from customers, and over 13,000 of those were taken by staff on the ground. So it's a phenomenal response that they need to put in place as well.
What happens then when the storm does hit? Because, as you mentioned there, Storm Dara, and I know in January we had a snowstorm and people were without electricity. So I'm guessing, as you mentioned, the phone lines obviously start hopping. I work in media, so we used to always go onto your website and see the interactive map that you have, and we'd be able to see, where the outages are. But I guess for people who are at home when the lights go out, is it just suddenly phones just start going off?
Yeah, really it is, I suppose, yeah. So the first thing that happens is people start phoning in. If the storm is running through the country, people start noticing that either their power has gone, or they'll notice that there's damage out on the ground. They may see fallen wires. So they will start calling the contact centre. And in the first few hours of the storm, you can get a huge volume of calls coming in. And a lot of times it's not even safe for us to go out and start, doing work on the network. So that's when our National Control Centre really kind of comes into its own. So they're based in Leopardstown. And again, they'll have staffed up in the light of an emergency like that. So they will get the calls will be logged in our system, and they're in a position to be able to switch some devices remotely from the control centre. So they will disconnect any lines if there's a danger, and then they'll also start trying to restore power to large groups of customers where they can.
I have to say it is great the amount of instances where the electricity does go and it does get restored.
Yes. No, and again, I suppose how quickly you get your supply back can be very dependent on where you're living in the country. Yeah. So again, if you're living in an urban centre, you're probably less likely to be impacted in the first place because you've got underground network connecting into the system. But then if you're in a rural part of the network, you can be at the end of a line, and that's the most difficult piece, I suppose, in terms of restoring power to our customers, because we will try and prioritise getting large groups of customers back first. And then as the effort goes on, it does get a little bit more difficult because you can be putting in the same effort and only restore customers to 2 or 3 customers at a time.
But Siobhan, we have to speak about Storm Éowyn. I mean, wow, that was just obviously the worst one we've seen. And it was, I know the word is thrown around a lot, but unprecedented. We talk a bit about it.
Absolutely, yeah. You have to really, don't you?
Yeah.
Listen, it was that word unprecedented. I've used it so many times in media and that, but it really is the only way to characterise it. Just thinking back, we got the advisory kind of issued from Met Éowyn a couple of days beforehand, and they were advising, we knew there was a storm coming. But then on the Wednesday, the 22nd, they had upgraded that to a red warning. And on the Thursday, the whole country just went red. And that for me was like, oh my God, like this is serious. So yeah, listen, for ourselves in ESB, we kicked in the preparation plan. So the National Emergency Coordination Group was stood up nationally. We stood up our own National Emergency Response Group. And we cancelled all of the planned work. We got all of our crews on standby. And the fact that it was going to be nationwide, I suppose it meant that everybody had to be on alert. And then we started staffing up the contact centre because we knew they'd be really hit during that period. So that was the Thursday. I remember my own team, we briefed our crews that afternoon to have them ready for the Friday morning. And then we just waited.
Yeah.
And again, that night, Thursday night, I think everybody remembers that. It's ingrained in their brain. The noise, the howling wind, the destruction. I know I didn't sleep very well that night. Got up the next morning, 5:30, 6:15, turned on the computer, and the screen was just red. It was lit up. So 600,000 customers had lost power at that stage. And the storm was still raging out there. So yeah, it was so stark. Then you kind of have to get on with it, I suppose. The red warning was actually enforced for a lot of that day, you know, till the afternoon.
Yeah.
So it did mean that we had to be really cautious about dispatching crews. We had to risk assess when it was safe for them to go out. But even over the course of the next few hours, there were a lot of emergency calls coming in. So we had hundreds of emergency calls on the screen by mid-morning. And it kind of peaked around 10:30, 11 that morning. So at the peak, we'd 768,000 customers without power. So that's almost a third of our customers. And again, if you look at the map, you know, the whole country was impacted, but in particular, you know, spreading up from the centre of the country to northwest was really seriously impacted. There were parts of the country like County Mayo virtually had no power that morning. So yes, it was difficult. We started out my own team. I know we started obviously ringing round, checking if they were able to make it into the depots to start trying to plan the work. And again, that was a struggle. So I think what was different with this storm was, apart from it being so impactful, and you know, the winds were 183 kilometres per hour at the peak. So that's hurricane grade winds. Yeah. But it impacted the whole country. It impacted our high voltage network, which is really serious because they're kind of the motorways that bring the power to the large urban centres. So they wouldn't normally be impacted, but they were. And then I think for us all, you know, not only was the power down, but communications were impacted and water was impacted. So people were, you know, triply affected. It made it really difficult for us also on the ground. You know, again, just getting people into the depots. People had to cut their way through trees. We couldn't communicate with a lot of staff at that stage. A lot of our own staff had lost power themselves at home. The mobile coverage was down. The Tetra radio was down, which is like our emergency backup. So yeah, the first few hours were really difficult. But then we got people into depots. We started responding to the emergency calls, and it kind of took off from there, basically.
Does it kind of guess, because it was just insane. I've never witnessed anything like it. And I think, as you mentioned, we're probably all going to remember those few days till the end of time. Like how does a company, even though I know you have so many staff and everyone's trained up, but where do you begin? It's like,
it is hard. Yeah, it is. You know, when you talk to like the guys on the ground in the offices, our supervisors who went in that morning and we're looking at screens, and you're looking at literally, you know, 700, nearly 800,000 customers out. It is difficult, but I suppose we have a storm plan in place, and that helps us kind of step through how you prioritise. So you know, initially you're looking at making, you know, situations safe. So you're looking at responding to your emergency calls, and you dispatch crews to those. So again, once it's safe to dispatch crews, we started sending them out to those emergency calls. So there are calls where there's maybe wires down on the ground or there's broken poles, and you know, the public could actually be seriously injured by them. So you start doing that. We can also do a lot of switching from the control centre. So even during the night, the control centre would have been, when the calls started coming in, they would have started trying to sectionise the network where you can isolate the faulted parts and start restoring power to the healthy part of the network. So we start doing that in parallel, and then you just start working your way through that list, basically. And it's amazing, you know, you can make quite good progress in those first few hours, first few days, in terms of the numbers of customers they can get back by doing that switching. So like even, you know, thinking back, we knew obviously with those kind of numbers that we were going to have, it was going to be a long restoration effort. But over the course of the first 3 days, like, you know, by the end of Sunday, the 26th, we had over 500,000 customers back. So their power was restored, which was amazing. You know, it was a great effort, and that made a big difference. So then it meant, though, that facing into that first week, then that we still had a lot of customers out, and it gets more difficult then to restore power to those customers, because there's your repairing network, but you're not getting as many customers back in the course of that repairs. So then we started, there was a lot of work in terms of drafting in additional crews to help us out. So again, the southern part of the country was not as badly impacted. And after the first few days, we were able to make good progress in the south. So we started actually sending crews up from the southwest and the south up to the north and the northwest, which was a great effort. And in addition, then obviously we got a huge assistance internationally. So like over the course of those couple of weeks, we had almost 700 crew members in from abroad from 7 different countries. Wow. So we had people from Finland and Norway, Austria, France, Britain. So a real team effort, and our colleagues then in Northern Ireland, they also sent crews down, even though they were impacted. Once they got clear, they sent their crews down to assist us as well. So at the height of it, I think we had maybe 3,200 boots on the ground.
Wow, incredible.
Crew members working. And then obviously we had a lot of people, organising work and planning the work, So again, about 1,300 people involved in that effort, in overseeing the effort, staffing up our call centre. People who would normally, they would have nothing to do with this kind of work. They were drafted in, taken off their day job and just, helping with the effort. So there was a great sense, I suppose, of everybody getting stuck in. Effectively it was kind of a national emergency at that point. So we needed to do everything we could to bring back power as quickly as we could.
So that's it for this week's episode of Re-Energize. A huge thanks to our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and spread the word about the show. Send this episode to the weather nerd in your life. We'll see you soon for the next episode.
This podcast was produced and recorded by the Podcast Studios for ESB. Production and editing by Connor Reid. Project management by Katie Flannery. Original music by Dan Wilcox. Video editing by Judy Hassett. Graphics and design by Matt Mahon.